In today's video, I'm going to give you 3 strategies to help you move your clients away from tracking their nutrition. Even if tracking is the best way to coach your clients and to get them results, they don't need to be doing it forever. So here's how to phase them out of tracking, which doesn't mean you need to stop working with them. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to move your clients away from tracking, but also keep them around and keep them reaching their goals. Let's start with strategy number 1, the off day. Long before your client stops tracking their nutrition altogether, they should already be practicing it. And they can do this by taking planned off days. Now, these can be deliberate and planned in advance, or they can be out of necessity when someone doesn't have access to the internet, or they have a particularly busy time in their life, or if they have a vacation and they don't want to track. One of my favorite ways to present this to a client is with the following scenario. If your tracking app crashed for a day, how would you eat? Probably not all that different than normal. You'd follow similar mealtime around exercise and around sleep. You'd eat when you are hungry. You'd eat until you're full. We want our clients to follow the exact same strategies and habits that they built up when they were using numbers as a guide, and do similar things without having to rely on the objective side of things. Now, the trade-off here is that they won't be as accurate, but that's okay because it's the whole point. We want our clients to be doing things that will maintain their results and improve their health without having to be glued to their phones. This is a good way to start removing aspects of control and make it so that they're not so reliant on tracking their food. So long before your client is going to stop tracking, here's how you set these off days up. The first thing you want to do is get your client tuning into how they feel when they eat and their energy levels and performance throughout the course of the day. And they can do this while they're still tracking. They're just going to pay more attention to it, and you're going to include it as feedback in their weekly check-in. And then on a planned day, perhaps on a weekend when they have a social event like a wedding to attend, you're going to give them the green light to take the entire day off of tracking. I like to do this when my client is still tracking most of the week to start remove some control and start to shift them into maintenance. It's a great exit strategy and also practice for how they will approach eating when they're not being as strict. You can start working in more and more of these off days, like the majority of the week, and then phase your client towards more mindful eating strategies without being so stringent. Then if they still benefit from the accountability of working with you and maybe they have other goals, you can still work with them. You'll just collect data on how well they stuck to other criteria. Things like eating protein at each and every meal, or including a fruit and or vegetable. Now, you may be thinking right now, well, why don't you just do that from the start? Because in my experience, clients need to learn way more about their food before they can get to this point, before they can be mindful about it. Here is another example and story to drive this point home. For the last 4 years, I haven't followed a training program. I lift intuitively. I have a rotation of exercises and rep ranges that I like to do, but I don't have a program that I follow. I have a rough plan and I go in and I work out. And I've done this over the last 4 years to pretty good results. But the only reason I'm able to do it is because I spent the first 15 years of my training career following a program and being coached. You need to learn to walk before you can fly, and this means at the beginning having more structure, not less. So for your clients, start working in off days long before they're ready to stop tracking altogether. This is a great way to practice mindful eating long before they're ready, and a great exit strategy to move them into maintenance. And it doesn't mean that they can't come back later to track again as a tune-up. Now let's move on to our second strategy, something that we like to call the flex day in the Dr. Mark method. Even if tracking works really well for a lot of clients, there are going to be some situations where you shouldn't track, because food isn't just fuel or numbers, it's cultural and social and should be enjoyed. One of my favorite ways to work in more flexibility without throwing in the towel is something that we like to call the flex day. A flex day is a partial tracking day where you track to reduced targets to around 3 or 4 p.m. This is usually around 60% of someone's normal calorie target with a bit more protein than usual. And what this does do is create a bit more of a calorie buffer for someone so they can take the night off without having to worry about tracking or the numbers, which means they get to eat what everyone else is eating at a catered meal or a planned meal. But this also gives your clients a chance to move away from tracking and practicing their mindful eating practices much earlier in the coaching process. But it's important that when they're not tracking, they're working on these mindful eating practices, like prioritizing protein, eating when hungry, but not until stuffed, listening to their body, not eating while being distracted, as well as focusing on not excluding anything. It's not uncommon for me to work in a flex day for all of my lifestyle clients within the first month of their program, but probably not during the first week. And this is something they carry throughout our work together. They take the flex day and then they get back to things like normal targets the next day. I like to view these as partial tracking days and not setting them up as cheat meals. And this is because your client doesn't need to focus on this process and food as good or bad, just better or worse in the context of their goal. And when you give them a flex day, it gives them a chance to get away from the numbers and realize that nothing bad happens when they don't track. This is gonna be really helpful long-term. Now keep in mind, we are talking about moving away from tracking, but tracking what you eat is still one of the smartest things you can do with your nutrition. But like anything else, it's just a tool. A tool that can be used to increase your knowledge on the nutritional value of different foods, control for the variables that influence body weight and athletic performance, achieve specific goals in different phases of life. But just like any other tool, there is always a time and a place. And although as a nutrition coach, most, if not all of my clients will track their nutrition, it isn't meant to be forever, although there's no shame to revisiting tracking down the road. But if you asked me, Dr. Mark, you have 12 weeks to get someone in the best shape of their life, what would you do? You best believe we're gonna do some tracking. It gives everyone the best chance of success. But even still, there might be some hesitation from your clients about tracking. They may say things like, do I really need to track what I eat? Is there another way? In my experience, the answer is yes, they should track what they eat. Now, this pushback usually comes from nutrition clients, and it confuses many coaches because they've been led to believe that they need to be client-centered. So if a client says, well, I don't really want to track, then they don't. But they also don't get results. So I'd rather get my clients to track and see the importance of tracking, and then over time, once they get closer to the results and have a better understanding of their food, phase them out from tracking, just like you're learning today. But if you do get some pushback about tracking, here's what you say. And feel free to screenshot this and use it in your own coaching. I totally understand where you're coming from. Tracking is a lot of work, but you came to me and my coaching to achieve a specific result. And the best way to do that is to get closer to the numbers and things that matter, like calories and macronutrients. This doesn't need to be forever, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It will get better with time. You'll have real success that lasts. Then we throw them into the deep end, get them tracking with the intent that it doesn't need to be perfect, but it will get better. But what if they say, well, why can't I just eat healthy? In an ideal world, we would just listen to our bodies and build on those mindful eating practices like we're learning today. But keep in mind, as important as those skills are, they're just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to improving your body composition and athletic performance. The numbers still matter, and arguably they matter more. Plus, we're surrounded by hyper palatable food and convenience food, making it really tough to trust our intuition. So quote unquote, eating healthy just doesn't work out in the real world. For nutrition coaches, the best way to approach this is to use tracking as a tool to achieve a specific result. In the Dr. Mark method, we call this setting the structure. Your nutrition client is going to control for what matters most by setting and building this structure. Think about it like setting a budget, and then you're going to fill the structure with helpful habits and mindful eating. The goal is to use tracking to achieve a specific result, learn more about your food, and then transition away from it down the road. Here's the last strategy to practice this transition, and it's with number 3, the diet break. Let me know if this scenario sounds familiar. I'm planning an all-inclusive trip next month, and I don't see myself tracking. I don't see you tracking either. It is a vacation after all. It's supposed to be different than normal life. If you've been dieting for an extended period of time in a calorie deficit, let's say 10 to 12 plus weeks, it can be smart and effective to break up your dieting into chunks. The best way to approach this is to work in something called a diet break, which means eating closer to maintenance levels of food for around 1 to 2 weeks, where you're not really gaining weight or losing weight, but you're giving yourself and your body a break. You can take an extended break from tracking for a vacation or just when you really need one, and then resume tracking in a more structured way down the road. Best practice here is probably to raise your food levels a little bit heading into the break for 1 to 2 weeks, so you don't go in without the numbers numbers feeling hungry or really deprived. As a nutrition coach, it's helpful to use diet breaks to plan for the long term and help your clients move towards their long-term goals without being so reliant on the numbers. And that's it, folks. Tracking is one of the best ways to help your clients achieve their goals, but they don't need to be doing it forever. And I hope you find these strategies make the transition a bit easier. Now, as great as all those tips are, if you're really serious about starting a nutrition coaching business, the next thing I'm gonna have you do is check out this video I've linked up right here. If you love this video, you're gonna really geek out on the next one. I'm gonna show you the 5 ways nutrition coaching is happening right now. So make sure to check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video.